Wow, good morning. Kenny was not very clear about how many people were actually going to be here, so uh, bear with me, a little bit nervous. My name is Gray Ramsey. I'm a Chattanooga native and a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Thank you, Kenny, for asking me to do this. I've never actually told a long form story about my service before, so the last few weeks have been I've been reminiscing a lot, looking at a lot of pictures, and it's been pretty emotional. I know this building was built to tell stories, to preserve stories. Each one of the names on these bricks represent a story, and I consider it an honor to add mine. August 11th of this year, it will have been 30 years since I crossed the parade deck at Parris Island and became a United States Marine. Growing up on Signal Mountain in the late 80s and early 90s, military service was really not on my radar. I came from a patriotic family. I remember waving flags on an interstate overpass as a unit deployed for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and watching the same unfold on TV as a high school freshman. Both of my grandfathers served during the World War II era, one in the Army Air Corps and the other joined the Navy to play football before a career in the NFL, but that's another story altogether. I was a Boy Scout and played sports, but I wasn't an ROTC or anything else that might have predicted a career in the military after I graduated from Red Bank High School. Then the recruiters started calling. I'd taken the ASVAB at Red Bank and apparently scored pretty well. The only recruiter I really listened to was Sergeant Randy Merritt of the Marine Corps. As Sergeant Merritt said, if you're going to do something, you might as well be the best, hoorah. Plus, the uniforms looked great, and it seemed like a great way to earn money for school. Of course, that decision turned into 3 contracts and 12 years of service. The Marine Corps made me a Marine at Parris Island, South Carolina, a basic infantryman at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and an artillery fire direction controlman at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. As a fire direction controlman, I worked in the fire direction center of an artillery battery, taking information from forward observers and calculating the data the Marines operating the howitzers needed to fire on target. Since MOS school, the Marine Corps had me shooting artillery at Camp Pendleton, California, 29 Palms, California, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Camp Shelby, Mississippi, Fort Carson, Colorado, Fort McClellan, Alabama, and Fallujah, Iraq. All scenic locations, as you can tell. But for most of my 12 years on active duty or active reserve, I was right here in Chattanooga with Mike Battery. It was Mike Battery that I was promoted to non-commissioned officer and later to staff non-commissioned officer. It was also where I received orders for combat. Without a doubt, my time in Mike Battery was the most impactful part of my Marine Corps service. I also believe that the story of Mike Battery is an important part of Chattanooga's story. And besides, I'd rather talk about that than just myself. You can already tell how extraordinarily humble I am. Mike Battery received deployment orders around April of 2004 for our July activation. I vividly remember that July afternoon boarding the buses at the Amnicola Highway Reserve Center and traveling to the Chattanooga Airport with support of Chattanoogans lining the route. Now a quick little historical reset. At the time we received our orders in spring of 2004, the situation in Fallujah had spiraled into chaos. Coalition forces had recently been forced to withdraw from the city under intense political pressure, leaving a power vacuum that insurgents were all too eager to fill. The name Fallujah had already become infamous, but in March 2004 it became something far worse. That was the month when 4 American contractors working for Blackwater were ambushed and murdered. Their burned bodies dragged through the streets and hung from a bridge over the Euphrates River in downtown Fallujah. These images spread throughout the world, fueling outrage in America and emboldening insurgents who saw it as a victory against the West. With the withdrawal of U.S. forces, Fallujah transformed into a stronghold for insurgents, drawing in fighters from across Iraq and beyond. It became a rallying point for jihadists and foreign mercenaries, all united in their hatred of the coalition. Reports from inside the city painted a grim picture: executions, training camps, Sharia courts run by warlords, and the open stockpilings of weapons for the battles they knew that were coming. By the time we were preparing to deploy, everyone knew Fallujah was one of the worst places to be. Even here in Chattanooga, my family had been following the news, watching the war unfold from a distance, but feeling its weight all the same. Just before I left, my mom pulled me aside and gave me her final opinion about our upcoming deployment. Don't go to Fallujah. This is called foreshadowing. As we began what would be our 60-day workup at Camp Pendleton on the coast of California, my mom's warning about Fallujah didn't carry much weight. The original plan for Mike Battery was to be used as a provisional rifle company. Every Marine a rifleman, after all. We were going to be split up and sent to a few forward operating bases on or near the Iraq-Syrian border. After years of training to shoot artillery, there was nothing appealing about this change. A few weeks into our workup, we learned that the 1st Marine Division's Regimental Combat Team 1 was in the planning stages of a second attempt to liberate Fallujah before the Iraqi parliamentary elections in January of 2005. They needed an artillery battery, and as luck would have it, one of the best was right in their backyard. When our CO told us the news, we were extremely motivated. Mike Battery, call sign Pale Horse, was going to Fallujah to shoot artillery. And as stereotypical Marines, once we knew there was going to be a fight, that's where we wanted to be. Now I just had to figure out how to break the news to my mom. Pale Horse arrived at Camp Fallujah on September 9th, 2004. We were replacing Marines from the 11th Marine Artillery Regiment, who had already established an artillery fire base within the camp's walls. Renamed Firebase Pale Horse, our primary mission was mortar and rocket counter battery fire. Using radar to track incoming enemy fire, we would return fire on insurgent positions who were launching rockets and mortars at coalition forces. In addition to our artillery role, Pale Horse Marines took on various security duties and convoy escort missions. There wasn't much time for rest. This deployment was going to be all gas, no brakes. The Second Battle of Fallujah, Operation Phantom Fury, began on November 8, 2004. Pale Horse's primary mission was to support the maneuver elements going house to house in the city with our howitzers. By the official end of the operation on December 23rd, Mike Battery had fired over 3,155 millimeter rounds into the city of Fallujah. And we did it with a Rock City birdhouse prominently displayed in our gun position. I served as the Fire Direction Center Operations Chief, overseeing the calculations and processes of the FDC as we received calls for fire and computed the data the howitzers needed to engage targets. It was a stressful but fulfilling position, especially as we could hear the units in the city over the communication channels relying on our support. Now, I know there's several Marines here, and I know if you're not a Marine, you have heard that Marines are commonly described as fanatical. Fanatical about grooming standards, fanatical about physical fitness, fanatical about how we look in uniform, and we look good in uniform, fanatical about our history, and generally fanatical about just being a Marine. No better friend, no worse enemy. However, I don't think the word fanatical is even strong enough to describe how Pale Horse Marines felt about shooting artillery. Relentless, rabid, maniacal. Choose your own synonym here. The Marines of Mike Battery prided themselves on being fast, accurate, and deadly with the 6 howitzers we deployed in Firebase Pale Horse. One mission from Operation Phantom Fury that I think encapsulates the work of Pale Horse Marines perfectly occurred during the heavy fighting of the first 2 weeks of the battle. The Fire Direction Center during active combat operations was a hive of activity and noise. Communication Marines were monitoring radio networks of the maneuver units in the city, as well as our internal comms with the howitzer sections, and most importantly, the Tactical Operations Center. That was our headquarters. The FDC Marines are plotting charts, updating pertinent ammunition and weather information in our gunnery computers. The Fire Direction Officer is plotting friendly and known enemy units on our battle space map. Everybody's chugging coffee. It's loud. It's hectic. It's a lot to take in. A normal fire mission would be sent to us from the Tactical Operations Center. A unit on the battlefield who needed help would request fire support, and the Tactical Operations Center would decide who could support based on air, mortar, or howitzer availability at the time. We were ready and willing to fire any fire mission we had come across the network, but 99.9% of our missions came from higher headquarters coordination. Bear with me here, it's getting good. Pale Horse was quickly gaining a reputation of being fast and on target. Marines coming in from the battlefield would call us sniper cannons due to our accuracy, and it was all because of a successful danger close mission that we fired one day that was even described on the History Channel show Shootout later in 2005. We received an out-of-the-ordinary call for fire directly from a unit in the city. A squad of Marines was pinned down on a rooftop and had taken several casualties. It was a lieutenant calling us for support because his radio operator was one of those casualties. They were outnumbered, and there were several enemy in the building just across the street that had them pinned down. They had only one chance to get out of that building, and calling us for help was that chance. The 155 millimeter high explosive rounds that we were firing out of our howitzers have an effective casualty radius of 50 meters. The target location that was called into us was a much less distance than that away from the Marines that were pinned down. After we received the target location and plotted it on our maps and charts, we informed the Marine on the radio that the mission was in fact danger close, meaning the target was well within the casualty range of the rounds we were firing from his position. We could hear the urgency in his voice when he told us that this was his only chance to get his Marines off of that rooftop, but we had to be accurate. I already told you that a combat fire direction center was loud and hectic. But when I tell you that you could have heard a pin drop when those howitzers fired that mission, it was eerily quiet. And was quiet for a good minute while we waited and prayed that we would hear a positive battle damage assessment after we knew that the rounds had impacted somewhere out there. And then we heard it. Effects on target, enemy neutralized. I have no idea what happened to the enemy in that building, but I know that the Marines who were still alive before we shot that mission were able to evacuate their casualties, get off that rooftop, and continue the fight. We heard many stories like this from Marines on the battlefield as they rotated back and forth through Camp Fallujah as Operation Phantom Fury continued. Mike Battery is based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but our Marines and sailors that deployed with us came not only from Tennessee, but also Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, all over the Southeast, and we had Marines from all over the country. There were 147 of us who deployed, and all 147 returned home. Pale Horse was blessed to suffer no casualties during what became the heaviest urban combat for American troops since Hue City in Vietnam, and the bloodiest, fiercest battle of the entire Iraqi campaign. After the main battle was declared over, Mike Battery was tasked with additional security and humanitarian missions around Fallujah as Iraq prepared for the 2005 elections. And just a couple of weeks more than 20 years ago, this month, we returned to Chattanooga on a March afternoon at First Horizon Pavilion, welcomed home by family, friends, and our community. All 147 Marines and sailors who deployed with Pale Horse to Fallujah are now authorized to wear both the Combat Action Ribbon and a Navy Unit Commendation, in addition to their individual awards. The Navy Unit Commendation is awarded to Marine Corps units that distinguish themselves through heroism in action against the enemy, an honor that reflects the dedication and sacrifice of every Marine and sailor in Mike Battery. I'm extremely proud of my service in the United States Marine Corps, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that I was afforded to have represented my hometown in combat. Thank you all for listening, and thank you again for your support of the Charles H. Coolidge Medal of Honor Heritage Center and the stories preserved in this building.